There is a show that finished its only season ranked 34th out of 114 programs on American television. By any normal measure on a major network, that is a hit. It was also the most expensive program ever to air on a weekly schedule. It was the first television series in history built on a production budget of $1 million per episode. ABC canceled it after one season. I'm Bast with Just Iconic Rewinds, and this is why Battlestar Galactica failed. ABC was the #1 network in America in 1978. They had Laverne and Shirley as the top-rated show in all of primetime, along with Happy Days and Three's Company. Mork and Mindy was about to premiere. They could afford to bet on something expensive because the money was already coming in from everywhere else. What happened to Battlestar Galactica had nothing to do with the audience. The audience showed up. Something happened on a network across town in October of 1978 that ABC never recovered from. The press barely covered it. The audience never saw it. By the time ABC realized what was being done to them, they had already lost the nerve to fight back. This is what actually killed it. To understand why ABC lost that nerve, you have to understand what they had bet on. The pilot was called Saga of a Star World. It ran 3 hours long. The production budget came in somewhere between $7 and $14 million, depending on which trade publication you trust. The pilot alone cost more than entire seasons of network television. Universal Studios was footing the bill on a deficit financing arrangement that meant they would not see profit until syndication. ABC paid roughly $750,000 to air each episode twice. Universal absorbed the rest. The reason it cost what it cost was sitting in a warehouse in Van Nuys, California. John Dykstra had won the Oscar for the effects on Star Wars, then walked out of Industrial Light and Magic and started his own company called Apogee. He brought half the ILM crew with him. Richard Edlund came too. For the pilot alone, Apogee built 45 distinct spacecraft and shot more than 300 effects sequences. According to producer Leslie Stevens, that was roughly 15% more visual effects work than Star Wars itself. That is the math ABC signed off on. A weekly television show with more effect shots per episode than the highest-grossing science fiction film in history. Glen Larson was a producer who knew exactly what he was doing and exactly what he could get away with. He was also a devout member of the Latter-day Saints, and he buried the theology of his church inside the show. The lost homeworld of humanity is called Kobol. That is an anagram of Kolob, which in Mormon scripture is the star nearest the throne of God. The fleet is governed by a ruling body called the Quorum of the 12. The Mormon Church has a governing body called the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Marriages are sealings, performed for all the eternities. Harlan Ellison reportedly called Larson by the nickname Glen Larceny, because the show borrowed from so many sources at once. It also borrowed from Glen Larson's prayer book. Most of the audience had no idea. The Cylons themselves were designed by Emmy-winning costume designer Jean-Pierre Dorliac. Producer Leslie Stevens told him exactly the look he wanted. According to Dorliac's memoir, Stevens said the Cylons should look like chrome fenders on a car. They had to be highly polished and cold. They had to be worn by the tallest stuntmen available, with built-up boots to make them taller still. The single red eye that sweeps back and forth across the helmet was a deliberate choice. There was no face, just a single line of light moving from side to side. Dorliac won an Emmy in 1979 for the episode that guest starred Fred Astaire. The voice of the Cylon Imperious leader belonged to Patrick Macnee, the British actor most viewers knew as John Steed from The Avengers. Macnee also recorded the opening narration that every fan can still recite from memory. Quote, "There are those who believe that life here began out there," end quote. He played a third role too, on screen, as the villain Count Iblis in the episode War of the Gods. One British gentleman holding down 3 jobs on the same American science fiction show. The pilot premiered on Sunday, September 17, 1978. About 2/3 of the way through the broadcast, ABC cut into the East Coast feed with a special report. President Carter was signing the Camp David Accords. Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin were shaking hands on the White House lawn. The most expensive television premiere in history was interrupted by Middle East peace. Even with the interruption, the pilot was the 5th highest-rated program on television that week. Newsweek called it a phenomenon. The Washington Post had predicted before air that it would probably be the most watched new series of the season. They were right for about 3 weeks. ABC ordered it to series. That was when the wheels came off. The pilot had been shot as the first of 3 intended television movies. The moment ABC saw the premiere numbers, they ordered Larson to retool the entire production into a weekly hour-long drama, mid-flight, with no additional prep time. He told his staff, production fell into what supervising producer Don Belisario later called Crash of the Week. Episodes were written in days. Scripts arrived on set during shooting. Actors read dialogue off cue cards because there had not been time to memorize anything. By the back half of the season, some episodes wrapped photography 10 days before their air date, with editing and dubbing finishing the night before broadcast. Tom Shales reported in the Washington Post that one episode was being mixed at 5 in the morning the day it was scheduled to air. Even the effects budget that justified the price tag started getting shaved. Dykstra's footage was reused episode after episode. Fans saw the same Viper launch tube every week, the same Cylon Raider explosion, the same shot of the Galactica turning into the void. Fans noticed. Critics noticed. The show that had been sold on Star Wars level effects was starting to look like Star Wars level effects on a loop. In June of 1978, 3 months before the pilot even aired, 20th Century Fox sued Universal and ABC. The case was called 20th Century Fox Film Corporation versus MCA Incorporated. Fox alleged Galactica had copied 34 specific ideas from Star Wars. Universal countersued, claiming Star Wars had borrowed from their 1972 film Silent Running and the original 1930s Buck Rogers serials. The lawsuit dragged on for years. It went to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. It eventually settled with no winner declared. But it hung over the production the entire first season, and the legal bills came out of a budget that was already underwater. That is what was happening inside the show. What happened outside the show was worse. Before we get to that, if you are enjoying this, like the video and subscribe. It helps the channel reach more people who remember when Sunday nights actually meant something on network television. CBS had a problem in October of 1978. They had launched a variety hour for Mary Tyler Moore called Mary. It was supposed to anchor their Sunday night. It was a disaster. 3 episodes aired and the network pulled it. The schedule that replaced it would kill Battlestar Galactica. CBS moved their entire 9 to 11 block up an hour. All in the Family, the most successful sitcom in the history of American television, slid from 9 o'clock down to 8. 8 o'clock Sunday was Battlestar Galactica's slot. From October of 1978 through March of 1979, All in the Family averaged more than 40% of the 8 o'clock audience. Galactica averaged 28. Gary Deeb wrote in the Chicago Tribune that Galactica had captured as much as 45% of the Sunday night audience in its first weeks on the air. Once Archie Bunker moved opposite it, that number collapsed to 27 or 28. The show did not get worse. The competition got murderous. But the network move alone shouldn't have killed Battlestar Galactica. Plenty of shows survive a bad time slot. What killed Galactica was what ABC did next. The proof of that sits in a single sentence printed in the Chicago Tribune in December of 1979. We will get to what it says. Here is the part that matters. ABC was already #1 in primetime. They had Laverne and Shirley as the top-rated show in all of television. Three's Company and Mork and Mindy were both performing strongly in the top 10. ABC did not need Battlestar Galactica to win Sundays. The network needed Galactica to justify costing $1 million an episode. The math on a show that expensive only works when it is a runaway blockbuster. Merely being a hit was not good enough. So ABC started panicking. Galactica got preempted for specials. The schedule got irregular. Episodes aired out of order. By April, the show was on screen so inconsistently that the Associated Press described it as broadcast irregularly in recent weeks. ABC had already decided. They just had not announced it yet. On April 23, 1979, ABC announced the cancellation. The final episode, The Hand of God, aired on April 29th. Officially, the reason given to the press was ratings. According to the Toledo Blade, the unofficial reason, the one nobody at ABC would put on the record, was the budget. Network executives could not bring themselves to keep paying what the show cost when it was no longer the top of the top. The cancellation hit some fans harder than the network could have imagined. Letters poured into ABC by the thousands. There were sit-ins at affiliate stations. There was picketing outside the network's offices. In August of that year, the Associated Press wired a story out of West St. Paul, Minnesota. A 15-year-old boy named Eddie Seidel Jr. had taken his own life. His parents told reporters that his whole life had been wrapped up in the show, and that he had phoned ABC repeatedly to beg them to renew it. He had other struggles in his life. The cancellation was not the only thing, but it was the thing that made the news. Fred Silverman had built ABC's #1 schedule in the first place. He was the executive who originally greenlit Battlestar Galactica. He had left ABC for the presidency of NBC in 1978, before the show ever aired. By the time the cancellation announcement went out, Silverman was running the rival network. Tom Shales asked him about Galactica in the Washington Post. Silverman said, quote, "If ABC renews that show, that will prove they are in real trouble," end quote. The man who had bought the show was, by the end, rooting against it from across town. ABC took his advice. And then, in the fall of 1979, ABC tried to win Sundays back. They moved Mork and Mindy into Battlestar Galactica's old 8 o'clock slot. Mork had finished the previous season ranked third in all of primetime. Robin Williams was the hottest comedy star on television. ABC put their biggest hit head-to-head with All in the Family, which had now been retitled Archie Bunker's Place. Mork crashed from 3rd place to 27th. That was worse than Galactica had ever done in the same time slot. An ABC source spoke to Gary Deeb at the Chicago Tribune in December of 1979. The source said, quote, "When you look at the numbers Mork got reduced to by Archie Bunker, and then compare those to Galactica's numbers against Archie, there's no way you can consider Galactica a failure. It's just that Sunday night is brutally competitive, and nobody has ever found a way to beat Bunker." End quote. That is the sentence that explains everything. Battlestar Galactica did not fail because of its audience. It failed because of its network. ABC killed a program that was finishing 34th out of 114 because they could afford to. Because the rest of the schedule was strong enough that nobody had to swallow the cost of keeping Galactica alive. The most expensive show on television did not die from low ratings. It died because being merely successful was not good enough to justify being merely expensive. 2 weeks after the cancellation, ABC called Glen Larson back. They wanted Galactica back on the air. They wanted it cheap. The new version had to be family-friendly. It had to be educational. Standards and Practices wanted moral lessons in every episode. The new show was called Galactica 1980. By the end of the first episode, the fleet had finally found Earth. The premise was that Cylon-hunted refugees were now hiding among American children, riding flying motorcycles around Southern California. Only Lorne, Greene, and Herb Jefferson Jr. returned from the original cast. The new leads were Kent McCord and Barry Van Dyke. The show premiered in the 7 o'clock Sunday slot, directly opposite 60 Minutes. It lasted 10 episodes. The final episode, The Return of Starbuck, is widely considered the only hour of television the spin-off ever produced that was worth watching. Richard Hatch, who had played Apollo, refused to let the original show stay dead. For nearly 20 years, he lobbied to bring it back. In 1998, he self-financed a proof-of-concept trailer called Battlestar Galactica: The Second Coming, paying for the visual effects out of his own pocket. He used it to pitch the studios. They turned him down. They were not ready yet. In December of 2003, the Sci-Fi Channel aired a 3-hour miniseries developed by Ronald D. Moore and David Icke, a reimagining of the show ABC had killed. It became a full series the following year. Glen Larson was credited as consulting producer. The new Battlestar Galactica won a Peabody Award in 2006. The citation reading that it was being honored for, quote, "pushing the limits of science fiction and making it accessible to all," end quote. It won Hugos. It won Emmys. The New York Times put it on its list of the 20 best television dramas since The Sopranos. Time magazine put it on its list of the 100 best television shows of all time. The show ABC canceled because it cost too much eventually became one of the most acclaimed dramas in the history of the medium. The original show had run for a single season. It produced 24 episodes of television. It finished 34th out of 114 programs on a network at the top of its game. That is what ABC threw away. ABC did not kill Battlestar Galactica because nobody wanted to watch it. They killed it because a network with 3 other massive hits could afford to walk away from a 4th one. The most expensive show on television survived its own production chaos, its own lawsuit, its own crash of the week scheduling. It did not survive a rich network's lack of nerve. By the time anyone realized the slot itself was unwinnable, the show was already gone, and the only thing left in the room was the ghost of what it could have been if anyone at ABC had been willing to fight for it. If you like the stories behind the shows that almost made it, subscribe. I'm Bast with Just Iconic Rewinds. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow.